Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani back with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. You can see. For those of you who are longtime adherents to common sense, you know what we're looking at because you've been here before. But it's been a while. We are in Florida. We are in Palm Beach, Florida. And for those of you who are Trump fans or otherwise obsessed with Trump in a bad way, we're about 1 mile from the beautiful Mar-a-Lago, so now you know where you are. So today, we're going to finish what we started 2 days ago, and that is we're going to tell you the 5 top stories of 2022, but a different version of the 5 top stories. These are the 5 top stories that were the most ignored. In other words, you didn't get the real facts about them. You've got most of the facts on the alternative media, the alternative resistance media that I would even put Fox in, although they play a foot in both corners. They're a little like France, where they had the people that were on one side and the other. They're on our side mostly, but then again, they'll call Arizona after 2 minutes when it was clear that it wasn't callable. And in fact, I believe most of America knows that Trump won Arizona. But, I just want to point out that there's a company that's right in there for you guys, ladies, conservatives who are now being minimized and persecuted, really have to stick together, and there's no group to stick together with better than Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile is a company that will do everything you need for your phone, for your tablet. They're just as good as any of the big name ones, which are mostly part of the left-wing bloc. They have been using a lot of their profits and money to fight for the right to life, to fight for the right of free speech, to fight for the right to defend ourselves. And those are the kind of companies we want to support. We want to support them on merit because I'll tell you, they're more sensitive to the inflation we're going through with great rates. Call them up. Get to them. Go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy. If you do the /Rudy, you'll get special treatment, better bargains. They'll also know this goes beyond business. It's friendship. It's not just friendship. It's a desire to preserve, protect, defend, and win back our way of life. And they play a role in that, as well as getting you better rates in an era of inflation. And by the way, if you're a veteran or a first responder, they've got special bargains for you. So go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy. Don't forget the /Rudy, because first of all, you'll get free installation. And second, they'll know you're part of us. Because to win this country back, we've got to do a better job of sticking together. They stick together really well. We've got to do it. And we're doing it for a good cause. And they're doing it to destroy our country, destroy our way of life, and very, very often to make unseemly, ridiculously illegal amounts of money. We just want to pass our country on to our children better than it's been passed to us. And Patriot Mobile is a big part of that, a big part of that. I might also add, so are we. So while you're doing that, subscribe to rudycommonsense.com, rudycs.com. Subscribe to us. Support us. It would help a lot. And also, remember, 8 to 9 every night. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're right there in the middle of them. Never bothered me. I used to go on CNN and MSNBC. Remember my fights with, what's his name? Cuomo, the younger brother, Chris. Remember? Nobody else would go on. Go to that. Support us there. And, of course, my main one, WABCRadio.com. Get the app. You can listen to me all over the world, 3 to 4 every day, and with the incomparable Dr. Maria, 10 to 11 on Sunday. So, okay. Now, let's get to the finale. The finale is the following. We are living through the greatest censorship in American history. We were on the last podcast, which is a lead into this one, and the first topic we took up then, which would have been number 5 in our list, is the war that the Biden administration and the so-called progressive Democrats better described as the Marxist Democrats, which is now either the whole party by agreement or the whole party by lack of objection. They are having a war on parents. And the war could very simply be who controls minor children. According to time-honored Western civilization, law, tradition, and most other civilizations, parents do until the children are 18. That has been dramatically changed right in front of your eyes without your noticing it to the state. The state decides what happens to your children when there's a showdown. If you don't want your children to have their genitals taken off, the state will decide they can be. You're wrong, and the 13-year-old child and the state are right. If you don't want your child taught about certain sexual practices, the state can decide that they should be. They're at the point where, for pretty much any reason, they can try to take your child away from you, and pretty soon it's going to be because you're a right-wing conservative teaching people terrorism. Because our Attorney General thinks that parents who don't want their children taught critical race theory are terrorists, largely because his son-in-law is making a fortune by teaching critical race theory, which you don't know about because it's censored. You getting a hint on what the biggest story may be? Now we get to story number 3. Story number 3, which could also be story number 1, is we are going through a crime epidemic that the sellout media is understating dramatically. This is the worst crime epidemic of my lifetime, and I fought crime most of my adult life. I probably know as much about it as anyone, and I've been more successful than anyone. No one has reduced crime over the period of time that I did. There's not even a competitor as much as I did. So this is something I feel I have a tremendous amount of authority to speak on. It is something I feel that my opponents actually should largely be in jail for dealing with it, because every time they've been in charge, large numbers of people die. And I'm talking about Democrats. Democrats should not be running cities until they change the Democratic Party, because when they run cities, you can guarantee large numbers of people who weren't going to be the victims of crime do become the victims of crime, and then in some cities, they get murdered. In many cities, a disproportionate number of the people who suffer from that are poor black people. And this taking advantage of them has been going on for years under the guise that the Democratic Party cares about blacks and the Republican Party is racist. First of all, the Republican Party has never been racist. The Democratic Party has, for most of its early existence, been the chief proponent of racism in the world. Why they continue to maintain the name Democrat is only because they're insensitive. I mean, if they're telling you it's insensitive to say Jefferson because he had a couple of slaves, it sure as hell is insensitive to say Democrats when they're the cause of slavery. Fought for it, helped to lead a war that killed fellow Americans who were fighting to free black men and women. How about, you want to stop being a bunch of lousy, dumb, miserable, un-American hypocrites? Get rid of the name Democrat. Come on. You want to get rid of Columbus? Fine. I'm not going to let you do it, but you're going to get rid of Democrat. How, my fellow Americans, do you put up with this hypocrisy? How'd you vote for Biden? I mean, okay, they cheated. I'm not talking about the votes yet. And I'm not saying they didn't cheat on the votes. I'm not one of those, suck-arounds that says they didn't cheat on the vote. But I'm telling you, you don't have to even go to the vote. They cheated on the hard drive. He wouldn't have been elected president if you knew he was one of the biggest crooks in America in the last 30 years, that he was tied up with Whitey Bulger, that he was tied up with the most crooked man in Ukraine, the most crooked woman in Russia. I mean, he didn't pick people to tie up with who were decent people. He was getting bribes from some of the worst criminals in the United States through his son, who was a bag man. And if you don't know that, go back to school. I mean, just like take Reading 101, something like that, because you're too stupid or you're too brainwashed to really take care of yourself. If you can't figure out that Joe Biden was taking bribes, somebody else should be running your family. How about that? So here we go now to crime, which is the thing Democrats bring the most. This is what you elect a Democrat as a mayor, we're going to have crime. Let me give you an example. New York City has gone through 3 years of massive crime increases. We hadn't had a riot in New York for 20 years. The last riot we had was under a Democratic mayor. The latest riot we had was under a Democratic mayor. 20 years of Republicans, no riots. 20 years of Republicans, Crime goes down by record numbers. 20 years of Republicans, New York City goes from the crime capital of America to the safest large city in America and remains that way for a generation. There's no mayor that even has come to half of the numbers that I reduced crime by. I reduced crime by anywhere, depending on how you calculate it, 62 to 72%. Reduced murder in the black community by 80%, which none of my colleagues, all of whom claim to be big proponents of the black people, failed at and got black people killed at murderous levels, at record levels. Saw Harlem deteriorate as they became millionaires. I saw Harlem turn around completely, become a relatively safe community, and for the first time get national stores that wouldn't go there when the Charlie Rangels and the David Dinkins were running it and not taking care of the people there, letting it deteriorate and stealing money. I give you one example, and then we wouldn't have to do many more. Chicago, run by Democrats for 50 years. Chicago, every weekend, is a killing field. What happens there is a national disgrace. America is not systemically racist. That is not a national disgrace. America actually should be praised for how it's overcome racism. Should be criticized for the racism of the past. It should be criticized for the slave-owning Democrat Party. But it should be praised for how it's overcome racism. What it shouldn't be praised for is how Democrats feed on the black community and allow them to be killed at record numbers. When is the last time Black Lives Matter complained about a single black person killed in Chicago? Never. When do they complain about a single black person killed where they can't make millions of dollars by conning you? Never. Do they care if a 2-year-old black baby is killed in Brooklyn? They don't even mention it because they can't make money and go build mansions for themselves. We got Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, this time working with the communists. Please, wake up, America. This crime problem is a created crime problem. Sometimes crime problems emerge from very complicated social circumstances. They emerge from other things. This one is created. All you have to do is play back 2020 afternoon television and you see 2022 afternoon television. The people going into the stores, looting them like crazy, pulling out everything in the stores, and the police sitting by making notes. This mayor, who reduced crime more than anyone else, first time he saw that, yelled at the police officer on the television, put down the damn pen, get out your gun, and go get the guy. Oh, but they had a different theory. Their theory was, oh, come on, they have a right to do this. They've been oppressed for so long. They have a right to steal everybody's property. And by goodness, we can't arrest them for it. So they let 2 or 3 days go by to get out of control. Now they're burning buildings. They're killing people. They're sending cops to the hospital. Their damages are getting into depending on the value of the city, into the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And they finally tried to crack it down. They crack it down. They arrest people, and Kamala Harris comes up with the bail money to get them out. And if it isn't Kamala Harris, you know it's George Soros, right? And George Soros' DAs are sitting there for the express purpose of letting everybody out who commits a crime. It is not an accident that of the 10 largest cities for murder in America, all are Democrat. For the 20 largest cities in America, all are Democrat for murder. Of the 30 largest cities for murder, all are Democrat but 2. And there's the bottom end. That's Lexington and Jacksonville, which had a Democrat mayor who was a real card. Yeah, typical Democrat mayor. But in any event, 30 cities, 18 and 19 set records for murder last year. Those 18 and 19 are all Democrat. Of the 30 top cities, all are Democrat but 2. The 2 are in the bottom third. And I'll have to go find out and straighten out those Republicans, because there's no reason for a Republican mayor to ever have this kind of crime. There's no reason for any intelligent, decent person to have this kind of crime. This happens when you are so filled with hatred, anger, incompetence, or ideology overcomes common sense, like the entire editorial board of the New York Times, for example. It has to stop. America cannot be murdering its young people the way it is. America cannot be turning its back on young black people the way it is. You want the racist? The ones running those cities are racist and doing nothing about it. You want racists? You got Black Lives Matter. Doesn't care about blacks who are being killed. Black Lives Matter is not a racial organization. It's a Marxist gender organization. That's how it began. Second objective of Black Lives Matter is to destroy the nuclear family. Now, that'd be great for the black community, right? And then they want to get rid of God. So this is maybe our number one problem, crime. It's getting worse. We're going to end this year with a number of cities, again, who have record numbers of murder. We're not going to change it until we change policies. And I'm going to tell you, Democrats are not going to bring it down in any appreciable degree. A few who become like Republicans will. Ed Koch used to be a Democrat. He ended up a Republican, but he ended up a Democrat, but he ended up a conservative. He kept repeating Churchill's phrase, if you're not a liberal when you're 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative when you're 40, you have no brain. And he once was asked, why do the liberal judges let people out on bail? He said the only way to change that is to mug them. And then one got mugged and said, I didn't change my mind. They went back to Koch and he said, mug him again. So Koch is an example of a Democrat mayor who turned very conservative, then got defeated in a Democratic primary by the left-wing Democrats, who then gave us 4 years of record homicides in New York in getting rid of Koch. We've never had as many homicides, as many people killed, or as many black people killed in New York as when David Dinkins, our first black mayor, was mayor. And they defeated Ed Koch, who was doing something about crime. And then I had to fix it, and I did. And I fixed it for 20 years until progressive communist Democrats came along. So that's our number 3 story. Welcome back to Rudy's Common Sense. And we are now about ready to reveal the number 1 most important story of 2022, again, with the footnote, caveat, whatever. Most important story, yes, all of them could have been, but the one where it was hidden from you the most. Not necessarily hidden from you, but the facts, the real details, the real gravamen of it is hidden from you. When we talked about my immigration, and they call it migrants instead of illegal immigrants, nothing's changed in the legal definition. You can't change the law by using phony words. Democrats have stopped being lawmakers and they've become architects of phony words. That's government by dictatorship, but we've covered that. I did want to make one point, however, on that before we move on, just so you know that this isn't rhetoric, and I've gone through these stories rather quickly to get them all in because we have prior podcasts where we lay out all the facts. Unlike many other people, not on our side, on their side, we don't just say things, we give you facts. So 2022 topped the number of people coming in illegally, an incredible, astronomical 2.76 million. That's a city, a country, a state. We don't know who they are. They're not Americans. And they come from many different countries. Now, they don't all just come from Mexico. On September 30th, 2022, they had stopped migrants 2,766,582 times. And the year before, it had only been, and that was a record, 1,720 million times. This is so beyond Trump's numbers. To assert that this is Trump's fault is completely insane, particularly when he invited them in at the Democratic convention, Biden did, by saying, you should all swarm to the border to get ready for me to be president. And when you interview them, they all tell you they're here because of Biden. And it has spread out. It's now Venezuelans, it's Cubans, it's Nicaraguans, it's people from Europe, it's people from everywhere because they know it's a way in. And there's even a way to pay to get in because you pay the cartels. They are the gatekeepers. The Border Patrol can no longer patrol the border. They do not patrol the border. You can walk right in and you will have nothing happen to you. When Republicans and other truth tellers say the border is open, They are 100% correct. When the liars in the Democrat Party tell you the border is closed, they are lying in the face of irrefutable evidence that they're lying. It's like the reporter on CNN during the 2020 riots saying, this Black Lives Matter protest is relatively peaceful, and then he gets hit over the head with a baseball bat and a building burns down. That's what we have going on. In September alone, getting toward the end of the year, there were 222,547 encounters along the southern border, and it was up 12% in August. We don't have the final numbers, but it's up 12%. In other words, it's going up and up and up. And you know we have the Article 42 thing happening, which the Supreme Court has slowed down, which is they're actually throwing people out based on COVID, which they can't do anymore, and the Supreme Court has slowed that down. They figure when that stops, that 222,000 becomes more like 300. In other words, we're looking at 3 to 4 million coming in a year. There'll be no country left. And if you want to see the chart, this is just a little chart. Whenever anybody wants to tell you it's Trump's problem, show them, or even Obama's, from 2010 until Trump left office, it was sort of down here. Then it went here, now it's here. This is all the demented president right here. It is solely his problem. So now let's move on to censorship. And why is that the worst? It's the worst because it's the most pervasive. It's the one that if open borders can destroy us physically in terms of people as a country, because we're no longer connected by anything, censorship will surely immediately make us a dictatorship. The right of free speech is the last right that you have left. It's the reason I believe it's the first right in the Constitution. There are many constitutional scholars who have argued, although never to the point where it's universally embraced, that the First Amendment is the First Amendment because they're the most important rights. It's the right of free speech and the right of freedom of religion. When they're gone, you're gone as an individual. You no longer are an individual human being. You are now a creature of the state. So we can find many things proving this. Marx, Engels, Stalin, Mao, Saul Alinsky, Black Lives Matter are consumed with getting rid of parents. They're consumed with getting rid of God, and they're consumed with getting rid of your right of free speech, because they can't control you if those things remain. And what has happened to our right of free speech? If you can sit there and think it hasn't been affected, you're either not paying attention or you got to go get examined for being brainwashed. Oh my goodness, it goes back a long time, and it started slow. I'm not going to say it was ever benign, but not as dangerously as it is right now. So I can go back to Goldwater at the 1964 convention and his being booed by the press and his attacking the press and how he was treated somewhat differently. The Democrats and accused of wanting to destroy the world. Of course, the guy was a military hero. And then it got really, really bad during the Nixon era, when Nixon, was treated horribly. He did some very bad things, but I think history will reveal not much worse than Lyndon Johnson, where they were all excused, including how Lyndon died a multimillionaire, never having held anything but a government job. The program for taping people in the White House, put together by Lyndon Johnson, possibly John Kennedy. The idea of lying to the press, really big time, done by Kennedy, who covered up what appears to be numerous women, but not just numerous women, situations that had a real bearing on national security, women that apparently were put there by our enemies because he was susceptible to it because of his addiction. All of that was covered up until Nixon. They let loose on Nixon, and what did Nixon do? He either did or didn't support a second-rate robbery of the Democratic headquarters that yielded nothing damaging, and then he covered it up, which probably every president up until him had done something similar to it. And he was driven out and made into a demon with no appreciation for the things that he did for our country over many, many years. And it became then a Republican-Democrat situation. I mean, Carter was treated much more nicely than Ford, who was made a fool of. Reagan was considered a Hollywood idiot, treated that way throughout his presidency, made fun of, and just happens to be, without any doubt, among anyone serious, the most successful president of the second part of the 20th century. Easily challenging Roosevelt, both with regard to liberating people, Roosevelt, Europe, Ronald Reagan, Eastern Europe. Except Ronald Reagan did it without firing a shot. Pretty good. And he did it without making us into a socialist, almost communist enterprise. We have done podcasts on this. I assure you we are going to do podcasts on this in which we illustrated so many different ways we break it. Let me make a simple statement and then give you a little proof, and then we're going into the next year. We're going to prove it until we destroy it. We are going through the biggest censorship ever experienced in a country of free speech, in a country that was founded on bedrock principles of freedom of religion, freedom of speech. There are two most important rights. That's why they're number one in the Constitution. Think about it. When you lose your freedom of speech, you lose your ability to complain about oppression. If you can't complain about oppression, what can you do about it? Freedom of speech and the denial of freedom of speech in the socialist and communist countries that are guiding us and philosophies that are guiding us always end in violence. See what's happening in China. Look at Venezuela every day. Look at what's happening in Iran with a dictatorship. They can't petition the government for a redress of grievances, which is the way our founding fathers described it. When that's ripped away from you and your children are starving or your children are being prosecuted for crimes they didn't commit, or your children are being deprived jobs because they don't believe in global warming the way these people who think it's a religion believe in it, well, then people are going to resort to violence. Free speech is what keeps a country a peaceful, some form of a combination of Republican democracy. The minute it's taken away, then you either submit like a useless, wounded human being and give up your individuality to the state, which is their objective. Why do they make so many people dependent? Why do they put every solution in the hands of the government? Because they're being guided by Marxist philosophy, not by accident. They have now reached the penultimate point. They are taking our free speech away. I don't want violence in this country. I don't want a civil war. I don't want anything like that. We don't need it. You take away our free speech. In the history of mankind, that leaves options that are unthinkable. So let's stop it. Thank you, Elon Musk, for revealing it. You're going to find out that it's just the tip of the iceberg. The Bidens, the Clintons, the upper echelon of the crooked Democrat Party have been manipulating, along with Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley smarter than you are oligarchs, the completely sold out to China business people, and that crooked level of the Democrat Party, not all Democrats, not most of you, but that crooked level that began with the shysters, Clinton, and now with the multimillionaire Bidens, who've been selling out government for 30 years, and they're sitting in the White House, and they're even lying to you about his mental state. We have a right to speak out against it. As long as we have that right, we can make the changes we have to make. We don't have to see violence. This is very important. Please, please, starting next year, pay real attention to it. Listen to me every week. I'll give you the truth. If you don't, a lot of things you may not know going on are going on, because I tend to get things and see things in a way that others don't. And I have a lot of colleagues that I would say the same thing. So I thank you for supporting us. We couldn't do this without you. We need more of you. Please make a concerted effort to get more of us on the podcast, on the live stream, and on WABC. And who knows, we're going to have more offerings for you next year. So I say to you, 2022 is now about to go in the history books. It has to be a motivation so that in 2023, we use every bit of our being, our soul, our mind, to preserve our way of life in our country. I thank you for being patriots. I ask you to ask your friends to join us, and I wish you a very happy, holy, and successful 2023. We will make it that way. Thank you.